The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
It's Tuesday morning, and I'm excited to be here, folks, because I'm here with you. And I love Tuesdays because I get to talk to you and bring you different experts who help you live the life you deserve. So for each and every one of you who have got our books, whether it's the Expert to Influencer or the Entrepreneur's Garden, I'm so thankful to you because I'll share with you, it will not only help you live your life that you want to live, it will help you become the influencer and create meaningful impact and have that relationship with yourself that helps you be fulfilled. Just not passing through life, but be in awe of life and have that wonder every single day. And also, we help from the partial profits to kiva.org. We help entrepreneurs all across the globe. And remember to keep the kindness circle going, because the kindness circle is you spend that hour of your time without any strings attached every month. And think about it. Even if 5 million people did that, that's 5 million hours of kindness every month. So without further ado, I want to bring on our guest, Cynthia Kay. Welcome, Cynthia.
Well, thank you for having me with you today. I'm just delighted to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So share with us, if you recall a moment from your childhood that still stands out for you today.
You know, there are many of them, but I think the one that really, and it wasn't one, but a series of ones, where my father was a small business owner, and every Saturday he would take us to the business with him. And it was like this whole world that we got to go into with him. And it was very special because I think I learned so much from watching my dad and my mom, although my mom was more of a traditional stay-at-home mom. But my dad wanted us to experience his world. And so we would go, and he was a dry cleaner. And we would go and check in the dirty clothes, and we'd sweep the floors. And sometimes he'd let me take the money to the bank. It was like 2 doors down. You know, that was a time when you actually could do that. And that was, to me, probably the best sort of glimpse into what my future could be like. And it's interesting that I have 2 siblings and we all own our own businesses. And I think it comes from watching my dad and watching the joy that he had in working.
Definitely. And whenever you're running your own business, you're your own boss, whether you fail or whether you succeed. You can't go complain to anyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I see that, you had definitely that interest in entrepreneurship since you were a child. So as you grew up, where did your interest develop?
You know, it's fascinating because I think sometimes we put limits on ourselves. And I always thought I needed to go and work for someone else, to get experience, to, have those, things outside of myself. And I always knew I'd own a business, but I didn't really think I would do it as soon as I did. But then, you know how life plays interesting games with you. I worked in
Mm-hmm.
broadcasting, and as you may know, that's a field where, every other week a new boss comes in and then you don't have a job. And so and so it was fascinating because I the last station I worked for, 6.5 years, I worked for 4 different owners. And the last one fired me, and it was the best thing that ever happened in my whole life because I had the choice to go work for someone else or really bet on myself. And I, like a lot of people, I felt like I wanted more control in my life. I wanted to do the kind of work I wanted to do, and I was willing to take that responsibility. And so I hung my shingle out and started my own media production company.
Way to go. So tell us more about before. So is that one company that you work for, or were there other companies that
There
you had?
were many.
Mm,
I worked for a number of different organizations, but 2 really long-term full-time jobs over 5 years each. And I think I often say to people, because I think people think that owning your own business is you get to be the boss. I say now I have like 130 different bosses. But I think when you're working in an organization, especially for me, it was a large corporation, and I really, it didn't feed my soul. There were things
mm.
about it that did, but I would say generally, it didn't give me that I want to get up and face every day kind of feeling. And I think so many people ignore that. They think, oh, it'll go away, or this is a great job, or I might be afraid to go do that next thing. And I think I got this from my parents. I was very blessed in that they always told us we could do whatever we wanted to do. And that was unusual because I come from a family where at the time most Greek women didn't really work, or if you worked, there were certain professions you worked in. But mine was not one, you know.
Oh, tell us a little bit more about that, because so many times what happens is that there are societal pressures,
Mhm.
and there are different pressures in different times.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, it was not the case.
Mhm. Well, I feel like my parents, I think, were ahead of their time.
Hmm.
And I also feel that they were, so if you know about very traditional ethnic families, the boys work, the girls, get married and maybe teach or do some things. And my father always said, I jokingly say, if you've ever seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the father says, I want you to stay home and have babies. And my dad always said, I want you to do what feeds your soul, and I want you to be independent. I want you to always know that you can do what you want. And he always used to tell me, he's since passed away, and both my mom and dad, but they always gave me the feeling that you should do what's in your heart. And daddy would often say that, do what's in your heart, honey. And so for me, starting the business and growing the business meant that I could not just serve my customers, but we could do good in the world. We do a lot of work in my company for nonprofits, and we give it away, or we do very reduced rates. And that was something that's a value of mine. And the companies that I worked for were not focused on that. I know many companies are, okay, many big companies are. The ones I worked for were not. So having my own organization really meant that I could do a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I was still working in that big corporate environment. For me,
Absolutely.
everybody has a different thing, right?
Right, right. And so sorry for your loss. It sounds like your parents were right there with you. And
Yeah.
as you said that they were progressive for their times. And what's important that's coming out over here is that when you let kids do what they want to do, they find new pathways and they create their own life where they're happy and finding that meaning. So that said, you mentioned that you had worked for several different broadcast organizations. So can you share what were the learnings that you brought from your time over there?
Oh, well, actually many things. For one thing, I learned the value of relationships, or the lack of relationships and what happens when you don't have relationships. I think there were many things. I learned to be a really good questioner, because I worked in investigative reporting and features. And so every day it was something new. Every day I'd go out and meet a new person. And sometimes I'd be doing a story about something that I knew nothing about. And so I learned to be very curious, and I learned to ask good questions, and I learned to try to relate to people where they are, not the way I was. And that's one of the things that I really spend a lot of time when I teach or I coach. I talk about, we're sometimes so internally focused. And if we can just do a 180, I call it. And I love to say, to my students, it's not about you and it's not about me. It's really about the person you're trying to relate to. And that's something I actually learned from the broadcasting world, because I had so many opportunities to walk into so many different places and meet people from on the shop floor to CEOs of major corporations, and everything in between. And that was a really great learning experience. I probably would not be where I am today if I hadn't had those experiences.
That's definitely profound. So curious, what made you become an investigative reporter?
Well, at the time when I was in broadcasting, there was a thing, they separated. There was news, and then there was what was called public affairs. And public affairs was those things that were concerning to the public. And so investigative reporting was a part of that. I did a number of stories about foster care situations that were not good for children. Modeling scams where they were charging people to become models. A number of those different kinds of stories that, you had to really kind of dig in and get the meat out of it, figure out what the story was. And I was really fortunate that I could work in that department. And then I also did live broadcasting, talk shows. In fact, the first station that I worked at, the woman that was supposed to train me, when she saw that they had already replaced her, she was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. She kind of walked out the first day and said, "Good luck." And so I had never done live television before. And so, you kind of have to, nothing scares me, but there are things I don't want to do sometimes, but you learn very quickly that if you can draw on what's inside of you. And I always say, what was the worst that could happen? I'd look silly or I'd fail. And, don't we all do that? I think we all do that at some point. So it was a great experience, because you do have to really, you have to be aware of everything, and you constantly have to be thinking and learning. And I think that's what I love about what I do now. I don't work for a broadcast station, but I still do so many of the things that I did back then. Talking to people about what are their problems, figuring out how to solve them, figuring out what can we make for people that will help them, fundraise for their nonprofit or launch a new product or whatever. I mean, and so to me, it's a challenge every day.
Absolutely. So tell us the transition. You decided you wanted to leave, and what was
It's
the
scary.
transition period like, and how did you build your company?
Well, it's interesting because when I started my business, and I've been in business 35 years now, there weren't that many female-owned businesses in my industry. It was pretty male-dominated at the time. So the transition was interesting. I jokingly say, people say, well, who were your women role models? And I say to them, there weren't a lot of women at that time doing what I did. So the people who helped me were older white men that were friends of my dad's who were so kind and so wonderful. The first one helped me write my first employee handbook. He helped me do that and helped me do these things. So but I feel very fortunate that I had a lot of people who helped. It's scary because when you start a business, the first how many months you're not making income and you're putting everything, even after that, you're investing back a lot into the business. But I always thought if I was going to do it, it was better to do it while I was young and to fail quickly if I was going to fail. And we've been through, everyone knows what the economy is like. I think I've probably been through 3 pretty significant economic downturns and COVID. And we have managed to build a really good, solid business. So you learn to weather those storms, and you learn to make adjustments and you learn to find people around you. I am very fortunate that I have a number of business owners that I can always talk to and bounce ideas off of. I think building that network of people helps you get through those transitions. But my dad said to me one day when I told him I was starting the business, he said, honey, do you know what you're doing? And, you know what it's like to own a smile. And I said, yes, Daddy, I've watched you all these years. And he kind of got this smile on his face and he goes, yeah, you're going to be just fine. So, he had a lot of confidence in me. And I think that, and that's why I think it's also important that people starting out are realistic, or even as they grow their businesses and you get to the point where I am, where I'm at the point of having owned this for a while and I'm in my transition phase. There will be another transition in my life in the next few years. You have to embrace those things. I think you have to, that doesn't mean you're not afraid. It doesn't mean that you don't get scared, but you step into it and you say, my option is to keep doing the same thing. And that doesn't help you grow as a person. So, I think change is good. And that's unusual for someone my age.
Well, when you transitioned, and as you mentioned that you have had your own business for 35 years, which is congratulations. That's a
Thank you.
big achievement. So during different times, what emotions and what feelings have you experienced, especially when your business might have taken a turn for the worse?
Yeah. Well, I think there's always anxiety. And, for people who have not, what I call it, signed the front of the paycheck, I feel, I have a staff of 10. I feel a great responsibility for the families, because their livelihood depends upon this. So I will tell you that there are nights that I will wake up at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning with something on my mind. Can I do this? Can we make some adjustments? Or even the good times, or sometimes there's anxiety too, you get a big new client and you're excited, but there's always that little bit of anxiety. But I think I think I've always been a fairly positive person. And I think that that serves people well, not positive in a Pollyanna kind of way, but positive in knowing that I don't have to know everything as long as I understand how I can reach out for help, how I can bring people to help me who are experts. And I think if there's anything I've learned over the years is I don't have to be the smartest person in the world. I have to be the most forward thinking in bringing people to the table.
Mm, definitely a lot of wisdom packed in that.
Mhm.
So, Cynthia, there may be a lot of people who may be thinking of starting their business.
Mhm.
What are the top 3 or 4 things they need to keep in mind as they're getting started?
Mhm. Well, so first of all, I will use one of my daddyisms, as I call them. They can't pay you enough money to do a job you don't love. So I think first, he always was that. So first and foremost, you have to truly love what you do. I to me that because then when maybe the times aren't so good and you're not making as much money as you think you should, if you still love what you do, there's just a huge value in that. So first, I think that's the other thing. Second thing I say is you have to be very realistic. I think a lot of people look at the business failure rate for businesses within the first 5 years. It's significant. And it hasn't gotten better in the last 25 years. It's pretty high always. Why? I think because people sometimes are not realistic about putting the plan in place and working the plan. So you can have the best product in the whole world, but if there's not a demand for it, it's not realistic for you to start the business. So I think, loving what you do, being realistic, and then I really believe in having a great team around you. Because as a business owner, there is no way you can know everything. And so you have to surround yourself with that team of people who are going to be your trusted advisors. And there's a lot of ways to find those people. I'm a part of a small business association. I've met many people through that, but also just talking to other business owners if you're not part of a group. Um, and I always say, expect that you will give a lot in the early years. Doesn't mean you won't in the later years, but you've got to weather those first 3 to 5 years, and those can be the toughest.
Mm, yeah, definitely. Being an entrepreneur myself, I can definitely watch for that. And things get easier because
Yes.
you're building the muscle for it. And at the
Right.
same time, it's also important to recognize that as a business owner, just like being in life or whether you're even in a job, there are going to be ups and downs. There's
Of
going to
course.
be ambiguity. There's going to be uncertainty.
Mhm.
So prepping yourself for those uncertain times as well. So you mentioned that your company has 10 employees.
Mhm.
So tell us about your philosophy as to what a company culture should be.
Mm. Well, I think that most people don't value culture as much as they ought to. Um, the saying is always, oh, it's about the people, but really it is about the people. And I believe that the culture, you have to model the culture. As leaders, we have to do what we say we will do. We have to be the model of, I call it serving. So, and every employee is a little different. What people need is different. Now, fortunately, in a small company, you can do that. The larger you get, I think the harder that is to do. But I do believe that at least in my culture, um, well, I mean, I can give you examples. Over the years, we've had a number of occasions where someone has become ill. And these are people who step up. What can I do? Can I take that job off of someone's plate? Can I do that? But I think having a really strong leader who does model the culture is important. So my employees know that I will not ask them to do anything that I won't do. I mean, I think that's a big thing. I'll do anything. I'll take the trash out, I'll get on a plane at 3 a.m. in the morning. I will do, I think that builds that culture. I think also being very transparent with the employees and teaching them. So I think business literacy is important for business culture. Employees need to understand, what are the challenges? What are we doing? They need to be able to contribute, even more so as the generations, as I look at some of my younger folks. I've got 5 generations working in my business. That's pretty unusual. We all think very differently, but we respect the fact that, I like to say, just because I did it that way doesn't mean you have to do it this way, but show me you can get the result, right? So I think respecting the differences is important, valuing people, valuing their families. I think all of those things, that culture is, I love it when someone says to me, it's such a joy to work with the people from your company. And because I feel that way, but it didn't just happen. And in fact, what's interesting to me is that when we're interviewing, the staff interviews these people before I ever do, because they have to work with them. They have to like them. They have to believe that they are good people, that they are skilled people. And sometimes they'll say to me, I don't think that person is right. I don't think they have the right work ethic that we do. And I go, really? So now to me, that's culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then that tells, what you mentioned was that culture is important, and your clients are telling you that it's fun and we love working with your people. And that's where a lot of people forget that your employees are the face of your brand.
They are.
Your employees are speaking or representing on your behalf. So when you pay attention over there, you are building your business. And so initially, some people may not have employees. They may be working with
Right.
independent contractors. And as you mentioned, relationships are very important. So let's say like now your business is stable. In your experience, what does it take to scale a business, and what things people can look out for?
Well, I will tell you that when I started, there were 2 of us, and we're at 10. We could be larger. We've chosen not to be at this point, but I think if you want to scale a business, the best thing that you can do is teach the people that you are working with everything you know. You need to, and I truly do believe this, because so often I think the person who is the business owner wants to retain all of that knowledge and control. And I even say this to some of my older employees: teach the new person coming in, because then you get to do something more fun. You get to go do something that's it. So I think if you want to scale, you have to stop doing everything yourself. I think that's really important. I think you have to stop putting limits on yourself in terms of geography, in terms of the lane that you are in. What I do today is far more broad than what it was when I started. We have added new services, but we also haven't grown so fast that we can't manage the quality. But I think to scale, you've got to stop doing a lot of the day-to-day. You have to bring in good people, and then you have to let them do what they do.
Absolutely. So tell us, as to when somebody comes to you, how do you help them, and what does the process look like?
Well, it's interesting because, so being a Greek person, I love to chat. We are very extrovert. But believe it or not, when people first come to us, we do a lot of listening. I mean, we really get to know people, and what are their challenges, and what is it that we can solve for them. It's not about me telling them what I can do. It's about understanding what they need and then seeing what we can do that can fulfill what they're going after. And sometimes if we can't, it means finding them someone that can help them. Because I think that, it's also important to, you can't promise what you can't do. That doesn't mean you don't stretch when you are, but when someone comes to us, we will listen. We will often then come back with what I call just sort of a statement of work, where it's, here are the things we can do. Here are the phases of projects. Here's the results you can expect. Most of our customers are not in our door once. We have very long-term relationships. I have customers that have been with us over 30 years. And then I have customers that are brand new this year. I think that's really good. But I think you have to know where you're going, and then you have to be very strategic about how you're going to get there, because what is it they say? What gets done is what you focus on, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So now you mentioned that you listen to them, and with your experience, what stages of businesses have different stages? Some may be starting up, some may be scaling, some may be bringing
First
in
stage,
new
second
clients.
stage.
So at what
Yeah.
stages do you help the businesses?
Well, often the businesses that we're working with are not in, I coach and I speak to first stage businesses. When it comes to the media production side of it, we are usually working with people who are past a startup phase and who have a good idea of where they're going. But I shouldn't say that, because we have had solopreneurs who are extremely forward-thinking people that we have worked with and helped them put together. In one case, we helped a person develop an academy where she was teaching people how to do user-designed interfaces. And she was a solopreneur. And another person who is a lactation specialist, and she has her own business. So I think the key for us is we're looking for forward-thinking businesses. And so I guess it doesn't matter, as I talk through this to myself, what stage they're in. It's, do they have a vision? I think that might be the qualifier.
And when you say that media production, so tell me, how does any entrepreneur know that they're ready for a media production company?
Well, today almost everyone is, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
It is a reality of our life that things have gone digital. Part of that is because so much of what we do is on those little devices, and sometimes it's hard to read, right? So video design, graphic design, animations, many of those things are now just part of the toolkit you have to have.
They're a must.
They really are a must. And so I for us, that piece of it is, especially I will say since COVID, because what happened is a lot of people weren't getting on planes and going places anymore. So we were doing a lot of work with companies that were doing webinars or town halls or product launches where people couldn't come and see things. And for me, as the communications person, it also meant I had to do a lot of training with people about what's different about communicating this way than getting in a room with people, and how do you give people that feel for what you can do when you're not right there in front of them. So that's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of people.
And that again kind of brings us back about having that resilience to pivot, because businesses, trends will change. And for a business to thrive, it's important to continue to adapting and accommodating and adopting new practices. So you have mentioned that, and I know that you are also sharing that you have an upcoming book. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, you know how when you get to a certain place and people start to ask you questions? And so what I decided to do was I had done a book called Small Business for Big Thinkers, released back in 2013 with Career Press. And it was showing how small companies, how they can work with global giants, because we work with a lot of global companies. Well, as I started to look around, what I've discovered is that much of the the business world is so different. I mean, look at what you've done with your books. I mean, you see how different the world is today. But I wanted to try and put it into, I called it the 4 stages. So the book is called Small Business, Big Success: How to Beat the Odds and Grow a Great Business. Because I feel like I've done that, some of it luck, some of it skill. But what I've done is I've looked at what's success at startup. And some people may have started up, but maybe now they're thinking of bringing a partner in, and that's kind of a whole new startup, right? So
Absolutely.
success at starting up. And then there's success at operations. This is where a lot of business people don't realize that you need to think bigger than what's in front of you. And so there's a piece on operations. How do you really do a great job with marketing and communications and hiring the right people? And then there's success at growth. You asked me the question about scaling. I think a lot of people get to that place, and then that next big leap, I think, is hard for them. And so they don't grow. So how are you successful at growth? And then the last piece is, how successful are you at stepping out? What are the signs that maybe you should be thinking about stepping out? And people go, why would you put all of that in one book? I say, because if you kind of know how you're thinking about where you want to be, even when you're starting, you should be considering how you're going to step out. Are you growing that business to be a lifestyle business, or are you growing something that you want to scale and sell? Because that will change how you operate and grow the business. And so I'm taking a really, I think, holistic approach. And I think there's a lot in there for people who are running businesses or thinking of starting or thinking of leaving.
It definitely sounds like a great book. And if people want to find out about you and want to work with you, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me at CynthiaKayBiz.com, BIZ.com. Books are on Amazon and also on Bookshop and Barnes and Noble. So, if you Google me, you will find me. But Cynthia Kay, out of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
So is there any one last piece of advice that you'd leave our listeners with?
That's a hard one, because I think people are at such different places in their life. And I think that the advice changes as we progress in our career. But I do think that, the piece that my dad always said, which is, do what you love, whether that's, in your personal life, who you volunteer for, what you do. You have to really love that and surround yourself with those people who are also really positive and love what they do, because I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
It
thank you.
was a pleasure talking to you, and I always love listening to stories and learning new things. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, for being part of our family, because without you, the show would not be possible. And do reach out to us and let us know how we can be of service and support you in the life you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care, and see you all next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.